Is Karl-Anthony Towns already becoming a problem for the Knicks? The honeymoon phase in New York may already be over for Karl-Anthony Towns. Just 3 games into the season, the newest star of the Knicks is facing scrutiny after a frustrating performance in the team's first loss of the year, a 115-107 defeat to the Miami Heat that exposed early cracks in the Knicks foundation. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates. Towns' stat line, 15 points and 18 rebounds, might look respectable on paper, but the box score doesn't tell the full story. His offensive flow was off from the start, and his body language told even more. The usually confident big man appeared uncomfortable, out of rhythm, and visibly irritated as the game slipped away. His 2 of 8 shooting from beyond the arc and a series of ill-timed fouls reflected a player searching for answers rather than dictating play. Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School didn't mince words in his post-game reaction. "He just doesn't look comfortable in this offense," Macri said, highlighting how disconnected Towns seemed from the Knicks' offensive structure. "This is the greatest shooting big man of all time, and yet he looks out of sync, taking 8 threes and forcing shots instead of letting the game come to him." Towns' frustrations boiled over in the third quarter, when 2 careless fouls forced him to the bench at a critical moment. With Jalen Brunson resting, the Knicks were desperate for scoring, but Towns' absence left them vulnerable. What followed was a collapse. New York's offense stalled completely, and Miami capitalized with a decisive run that put the game out of reach. The scene was a stark contrast to the optimism that surrounded Towns' arrival in New York. When the Knicks traded for him this offseason, expectations were sky high. The front office believed pairing Towns with Brunson and Mikal Bridges would create one of the most balanced offensive cores in the East. Yet, just days into the campaign, the chemistry looks off. Towns' fit within Coach Mike Brown's system remains uncertain, and his tendency to drift on both ends of the court is drawing unwanted attention. The bench struggles add to the pressure. As shaky as Towns looked, the bench was even worse. New York's reserves were thoroughly outplayed, outscored 44-21 by Miami's second unit. The numbers were brutal: 1-4-18 from three-point range and 6-4-32 from the field. Simply put, it was a disaster. Summer additions Gershon Yabusele and Jordan Clarkson, brought in to bolster depth and shooting, failed to make an impact. Clarkson, known for his streaky scoring, finished just 2-for-11 from the field. Macri downplayed his struggles, reminding fans that, "He's a shooter, some nights the shots just don't fall." But Yabusele's performance, and conditioning, drew far harsher criticism. "Yabusele looks like a guy who needs a couple more months to get into game shape," Macri observed. "He can't stay in front of anybody defensively, and he can't make a shot either." With Mitchell Robinson still recovering from injury, the Knicks are thin in the frontcourt, and Yabusele's lack of impact is becoming a glaring issue. The lack of defensive intensity and energy from the bench allowed Miami's reserves, led by Tyler Herro and Caleb Martin, to dictate tempo and swing momentum. Every time the Knicks seemed poised to close the gap, the Heat's bench provided an answer. The contrast in depth was impossible to ignore. Finding an identity before it's too late. 3 games is far too early to panic, but it's not too soon to notice trends. Towns' struggles aren't just about missing shots, they speak to a player still searching for his role. In Minnesota, he was the focal point, the offense ran through him. In New York, he's one of several stars, asked to adapt to Brunson's ball dominance and Bridges' two-way versatility. The transition has been rocky. Coach Mike Brown emphasized patience after the loss, telling reporters that integrating a player of Towns' caliber takes time. Still, his challenge will be to balance Towns' offensive freedom with the need for structure. The Knicks' offense has looked stagnant in stretches, with too many possessions ending in isolation plays or forced jumpers. Towns' body language, however, has become a talking point among fans and analysts alike. His visible frustration, slamming the ball, shaking his head after misses, arguing calls, is reminiscent of the criticisms he faced in Minnesota. The Knicks can't afford for that narrative to resurface. Leadership and composure will be just as important as production if Towns wants to win over New York's demanding fan base. Meanwhile, the bench unit must rediscover its rhythm. The shooting woes, particularly from deep, have been alarming. Through 3 games, the Knicks' second unit ranks near the bottom of the league in bench scoring and three-point percentage. That kind of production won't sustain success in the Eastern Conference, especially against deeper teams like Boston, Milwaukee, and Miami. A test of mentality and adaptation. The Knicks still have time to fix these issues, but the pressure is mounting. The team's early schedule doesn't get easier, with upcoming matchups against the Bucks and Celtics. Towns' ability to adjust, to find his spots within the flow of the offense, to stay disciplined defensively, and to avoid the emotional lapses that plagued him in Minnesota will be key to the Knicks' success. New York didn't acquire Towns just for numbers. They brought him in to elevate the franchise, to add star power capable of carrying them deeper into the postseason. But for now, what they have is a talented player still trying to fit into a system, and a team struggling to establish its rhythm around him. It's early, yes, but the warning signs are already flashing. If Towns can't settle into his role, and if the bench continues to disappear, the Knicks' promising start could quickly turn into another frustrating chapter in their ongoing quest for stability and success. At Madison Square Garden, patience wears thin quickly. Karl-Anthony Towns has the talent to silence the doubts, but it's on him to prove that this rough start is just a bump, not the beginning of a bigger problem. 5 takeaways from the Knicks' 115-107 loss to the Miami Heat. The New York Knicks suffered their first loss of the season on Sunday night, falling 115-107 to the Miami Heat in a game that exposed several early season concerns. Despite Jalen Brunson's spectacular 37-point performance, the Knicks couldn't overcome Miami's depth, energy, and fourth-quarter execution. It was the Heat's home opener, and the atmosphere inside Kaseya Center reflected that urgency. Loud, intense, and fueled by a Miami team that looked determined to make a statement. For New York, this one stung. They entered the night at 2-0, confident and cohesive, but cracks in their rhythm started to show as the game unfolded. The Knicks bench was outclassed, their three-point shooting once again faltered, and the team struggled to find a secondary scorer to complement Brunson. Miami, on the other hand, executed with balance and poise, led by Norman Powell's explosive outing and a decisive bench contribution that flipped the momentum for good. 1. Norman Powell takes center stage in Miami's home opener. If there was any doubt about Norman Powell's fit in Miami's offense, he erased it completely on Sunday night. Powell torched the Knicks for 29 points on 7 of 15 shooting, going a perfect 12-for-12 from the free throw line. His aggressiveness set the tone early, attacking mismatches, drawing contact, and finishing through traffic. He added 7 rebounds, 3 steals, and a relentless defensive energy that seemed to spark the entire roster. Powell's confidence is sky-high right now. Through 3 games, he's averaging 24.0 points per contest and has become the Heat's most consistent offensive option. While Bam Adebayo provided his usual inside presence and Tyler Herro orchestrated the offense, it was Powell who carried the scoring load when Miami needed it most. Every time the Knicks tried to make a push, Powell responded, a mid-range jumper here, a transition layup there. It was a veteran performance, polished and efficient, and it reminded everyone why Miami pursued him so aggressively in the offseason. 2. Miami's bench overpowers New York's second unit. The bench differential told the story of this game. Miami's reserves outscored New York's 44-21, a margin that ultimately decided the outcome. Jamie Jacquez Jr., continuing to prove he belongs, was the standout. The second-year forward delivered 17 points on 8 of 12 shooting while adding 5 rebounds and 5 assists in 27 energetic minutes. His movement without the ball, defensive versatility, and touch around the rim caused constant problems for the Knicks. Simone Fontecchio also stepped up, chipping in 14 points and stretching the floor with timely perimeter shooting. Together, Jacquez and Fontecchio punished New York's second unit, a group that never found its footing. The Knicks bench shot just 1 of 18 from three-point range, and without Miles McBride, who missed the game for personal reasons, Mike Brown's rotation looked thin. The absence of a true spark plug off the bench was glaring. Emmanuel quickly struggled to get going, Josh Hart's energy couldn't compensate for the lack of shooting, and Precious Achiuwa was outmatched inside. Every time the Knicks starters built momentum, Miami's bench flipped it right back, widening the gap with energy, precision, and hustle plays. 3. Knicks' three-point struggles reach a breaking point. For the third straight game, the Knicks' perimeter shooting failed them. New York launched 54 three-pointers, tying a franchise record, but connected on just 15, good for a dismal 27.8%. What made it worse was that many of those attempts were wide-open looks generated by Brunson's penetration or Towns' spacing. They simply couldn't fall. The reserves were particularly cold, hitting just 1 of their 18 attempts from deep. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl-Anthony Towns combined to go 9 of 25 from 3, but even their makes came inconsistently and often too late to swing the momentum. It's becoming a troubling pattern. Over the past 3 games, the Knicks have consistently shot below 30% from beyond the arc. This issue goes beyond cold shooting. It speaks to rhythm and spacing. When New York misses early, their offense tends to stagnate, relying heavily on Brunson's one-on-one creation. Without consistent outside threats, defenses are collapsing into the paint, daring the Knicks to shoot. Unless that changes soon, it could become a defining weakness for a team with postseason ambitions. 4. Miami's fourth-quarter surge changes everything. The game's decisive stretch came late in the third quarter. With Brunson on the bench for rest, Miami pounced. The Heat erupted on an 11-0 run, extending it to a 23-6 surge that carried into the fourth quarter and gave them an 18-point cushion. Jamie Jacquez Jr. capped that run with a driving layup that pushed the lead to 93-81 with just over 10 minutes left. The Knicks, meanwhile, went scoreless for more than 4 minutes. Turnovers, missed jumpers, and poor spacing doomed them as the Heat's energy overwhelmed them. By the time Brunson returned to the floor, New York was out of rhythm. The ball stopped moving, shots continued to miss, and Miami's confidence only grew. Adebayo and Powell closed the door with steady execution, while the Heat defense smothered any late Knicks push. It was a masterclass in momentum control, the kind of stretch that championship-caliber teams manufacture. 5. Jalen Brunson fights, but help never comes. Once again, Jalen Brunson was the heart and soul of the Knicks offense. He played like a star, scoring 37 points on 14 of 26 shooting, including 5 three-pointers and 7 assists. His pace, footwork, and decision-making kept New York competitive, even when everything else around him faltered. In the final minutes, Brunson willed his team back within 5, cutting the deficit to 110-105 with 1:32 left. But he simply ran out of time and help. Karl-Anthony Towns finished with 15 points and 18 rebounds but shot just 6 of 14 and struggled to find a rhythm offensively. Mikal Bridges scored 20 points, but many came after the game had already slipped away. Beyond them, there was little to no production. Andrew Wiggins delivered the dagger, draining a late three-pointer that sealed the win for Miami and sent the crowd into a frenzy. The Knicks' offense, overly dependent on Brunson, looked predictable in the closing minutes, a concern that coach Mike Brown will need to address moving forward. The Knicks now turn the page quickly. Their next challenge comes Tuesday, October 28th, when they travel to Milwaukee to face the Bucks, a team that thrives on exploiting perimeter inefficiency. If New York wants to prove it belongs among the Eastern Conference's elite, they'll need more than just Brunson's brilliance. They'll need cohesion, depth, and the kind of shot-making that has so far eluded them. The season is still young, but the message is clear. The Knicks have the talent to compete. They just have to start playing like it. How the Knicks can exploit the Timberwolves without Anthony Edwards. The New York Knicks have a major opportunity in front of them as they gear up to face the Minnesota Timberwolves at Madison Square Garden on November 5th. It's early in the season, but this matchup already carries weight, and circumstances have tilted it in New York's favor. Minnesota's explosive superstar, Anthony Edwards, is expected to miss the game with a right hamstring strain that will keep him sidelined for at least 2 weeks. For the Knicks, this is a chance to assert dominance on their home floor and continue their strong start. For the Timberwolves, it's about survival without their most dynamic weapon. Edwards' absence changes everything. Not just Minnesota's offensive flow, but the energy, confidence, and swagger the team plays with when he's on the floor. Before the injury, Edwards was on an absolute tear. He opened the season with 41 points against the Portland Trail Blazers and followed that up with a 31-point performance versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Through those games, he was averaging 25.7 points, shooting an elite 51.9% from the field and an eye-popping 47.4% from beyond the arc. Edwards wasn't just scoring. He was setting the tone, dictating the pace, and giving the Timberwolves the kind of star power that can shift momentum in an instant. Now, without him, the team faces a serious void. The offensive system that revolved around Edwards' creation and shot-making suddenly has to be rebuilt on the fly. That responsibility now falls squarely on the shoulders of Julius Randle, a player Knicks fans know all too well. Randle, traded to Minnesota in the offseason, has stepped up admirably in Edwards' absence. He poured in 31 points in a win over Indiana, showing flashes of his all-star form. His combination of physicality and mid-range touch makes him a tough cover, and he'll undoubtedly be fired up for his first return to Madison Square Garden in a Timberwolves uniform. Randle knows the building, the fans, and the atmosphere, but the Knicks know him too. Head coach Mike Brown will have a defensive plan designed specifically to limit Randle's comfort zones, force him into his weaker spots, and make other Timberwolves beat them. The Knicks come into this matchup riding momentum and confidence. They're 3-1 entering the game, assuming a victory over Milwaukee, and are beginning to find their identity early in the season. Jalen Brunson has been nothing short of spectacular, averaging 30.3 points and 5.7 assists per game. His poise, footwork, and ability to control tempo have made him one of the most efficient guards in the league. His 37-point explosion against the Miami Heat served as a reminder that he's capable of taking over games when needed. Meanwhile, Karl-Anthony Towns has found comfort in his new role in New York. The former Timberwolf is anchoring the paint, averaging 14 rebounds per game, while providing steady scoring from inside and the perimeter. Facing his former team adds an extra layer of motivation and insight. Towns knows Minnesota's playbook, their defensive rotations, and their weaknesses. That knowledge could prove invaluable for the Knicks as they look to exploit every possible edge. The blueprint for victory. Defensively, the strategy for New York is clear. Make Julius Randle's life miserable. Expect the Knicks to send double teams, force him to pass out of traps, and challenge Minnesota's supporting cast to produce. Without Edwards, the Timberwolves simply don't have another elite creator. Players like Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Mike Conley will need to fill the gap, but none possess Edwards' ability to draw double teams or break down a defense off the dribble. The Knicks' defensive intensity has been one of their early season strengths, and this is the perfect matchup to reinforce that identity. OG Anunoby's versatility on the wing, coupled with Josh Hart's hustle and Isaiah Hartenstein's interior presence, gives New York a physical edge that can smother Minnesota's offense. On the offensive side, the Knicks must attack the Timberwolves' interior relentlessly. With Towns' inside knowledge of his former team, New York has a tactical advantage. Brunson should push the pace, look to penetrate early, and create mismatches. The more pressure the Knicks apply inside, the more open looks they'll generate for perimeter shooters like Donte DiVincenzo and Anunoby. Expect the Knicks to test Rudy Gobert's mobility in pick-and-roll actions, forcing him to defend in space, a scenario he's historically struggled with. Rebounding will also be a key factor. With both Towns and Gobert on the floor, controlling the glass becomes a battle of physicality and effort. Towns will have to set the tone early, boxing out Gobert and securing second-chance opportunities. If the Knicks can limit Minnesota's offensive rebounds, they'll take away one of the Timberwolves' few remaining advantages. A crucial opportunity. This game might not define the Knicks' season, but it will say a lot about their focus and maturity. Good teams win the games they're supposed to win, and this is one of them. Facing a Timberwolves squad without Anthony Edwards, at home, in front of a roaring Madison Square Garden crowd, there are no excuses. Mike Brown will want his team to come out aggressive, execute on both ends, and send a message that this year's Knicks are not just a playoff team, they're contenders. For Brunson, it's another chance to solidify his status as one of the premier guards in the league. For Towns, it's personal, a statement game against the franchise that drafted him and defined the first chapter of his career. Minnesota, even without Edwards, is still capable of competing. Randle and Gobert form a physically imposing duo, and the Timberwolves play hard under pressure. But losing your best player changes everything. The Wolves will need near-perfect execution to stay competitive at the Garden. Prediction: Knicks 118, Timberwolves 106. Brunson leads the way with 30 points and 8 assists, while Towns adds 22 points and 14 rebounds against his former team. Randle will likely post solid numbers in his return, around 23 to 25 points, but without Edwards' scoring punch, it won't be enough. The Knicks take control early, maintain their composure, and close the night with another statement win at MSG.